Signore e signori, buonasera. Welcome to Tutti a Casa, brought to you by Casa Italiana Zerilli Marimo at New York University. We have a great evening for you tonight because the evening is dedicated to Italian-American women in comedy. It's an initiative that we at the Casa conceived with our theater company in residence, Kairos Italy Theater, and its founder and director, our good friend Laura Caparrotti, one of the most familiar faces in the history of the Casa. We are delighted that they are joining this incredible group of women virtually, but very, very lively on this virtual stage of Tutti a Casa. As you know, every year we have a theme to our theater season. Last year, it was a celebration of the LGBTQ movement because of the Stonewall anniversary. And this year, we decided to dedicate it to women, Italian-American women, and women from all over the world, and especially women in comedy. So the presence of women in theater in a comedic way, in a variety of different ways. The reason why we decided to do that is that both Laura and I took advantage of the little power we have to decide these things. And since we are both huge fans of a great actress, Franca Valeri, who left us at age 100 this very year, soon after she turned 100, this was our way to celebrate her life, her career, her passion for theater, her way of teaching things with a smile and of providing a critique of society without ever being a bore. And I think these two Italian-American women follow very much in the steps of the great Franca Valeri, actress, author, writer, and much more. And I don't want to steal from Laura the pleasure of introducing her guests, but I'm delighted that they are there with her. And without further ado, please welcome Laura Caparrotti. I give you a huge virtual clap, Laura. Brava, for all that you do, for theater, for Italian culture, and for the Casa. Thank you.
And for comedy. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, everyone. Hello. We are very happy to be here because this was supposed to be a show that was planned to be on March 10th at Casa Italiana, live with Gina. And actually, at the same time, we were talking about doing something with Maria in the fall. Maria, you didn't know, but we were talking about it. And so March 10th, Casa closed because of COVID. And so we started to talk about what can we do to do the event again and maybe online as we are doing it now. And well, we did it. We actually did it. And we combined the two of them because they're both Italian-American. But before I give you everything, I give you my guest, I want to give you their bios just so you can meet them properly. Gina Barreca. Gina Barreca has appeared often as a repeat guest on 2020, The Today Show, CNN, the BBC, NPR, and yes, on Oprah, to discuss gender, power, politics, and humor. Her earlier books include the best-selling They Used to Call Me Snow White, but I Drifted, Women's Strategic Cues of Humor, Is Not That I'm Bitter, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying About Visible Panty Lines and Conquer the World. If You Lean In, Will Men Just Look Down Your Blouse? And Babes in Boyland, A Personal History of Co-Education in the Ivy League. And I Am With Stupid, co-written with Jean Wingarten. I hope that the pronunciation is right. Of other 6 books she's written or co-written, several have been translated into other languages, from Chinese to German. She was called Smart and Funny by People magazine, very, very funny for a woman by Dave Barry. And she was also told to be a feminist humor maven by Miss Magazine. Gina award-winning weekly columns from the Hartford Courant are now distributed internationally by the Tribune Co. Her blog for Psychologists Today, as well, over 6 million views. And Gina work appeared in most major publications, including New York Times, The Independent of London, The Chronicle of Higher Education, Cosmopolitan, the Harvard Business Review. And she's also Board of Trustees Distinguished Professor of English at the University of Connecticut, and the winner of UConn's highest award for excellence in teaching. And this is Gina. Now we go to Maria. Maria DeCotis is a New York City-based comedian, actress, and writer from Fayetteville, Georgia, where she famously Christmas caroled for Big Boy at age 12. She graduated with her BFA in acting, cum laude from Boston University with a concentration in playwriting, and worked with Commedia dell'arte professionals in Italy. She has been featured in New York Magazine, Vogue, Rolling Stone, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, New York Daily News, Today, and many more. Maria's recent credits include opening for Mike Birbiglia on Broadway, Comedy Central, HBO Women in Comedy Festival, New York Comedy Festival, and a JFL showcase. She wrote and hosted a show for the New York Post called Win the Weekend and was a staff comedy writer for Mezzomani Time. She has completed the most advanced level of study at the Upright Citizen Brigade Theater. She's a ukulele singer-songwriter and a Lindy Hopper. On stage, Maria likes to explore feminism and spaghetti, which is really good. And I have to say that Maria was briefly part of KIT, and we did some shows together. And well, of course, she's great to work with, and she's a really great actress. And we were talking about being a stand-up comedian and so forth. And so, welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm very happy to have you here. Let's start with your Italian side. So tell me, both of you, where your family comes from and who came here first and how much Italy you have in your blood. You can start. Gina, you want to start?
Okay, I'll start. Of course, the first question would be, what part of Italy are you from? Because immediately everybody else is just, oh, you're Italian or you're part Italian. Isn't that lovely? The Italians want to know what neighborhood in what section of Italy you're from. And I don't even know if I count, because I remember coming to the Casa Italiana and for many wonderful events, for a book I did on the Sopranos, for the Penguin Book of Italian-American Writing. And one gentleman I met who was there said, you're not supposed to be here. You're Sicilian. This is the Casa Italiana. It's not the Sicilian. And it's like, so already, it's a combative. I mean, immediately you get into an argument. Everybody else is just celebrating Italian culture, except for the Italians, who immediately want to argue with you. It's fine. It's fine. So I'm Sicilian. My father's family came over from Sicily, from Casalbuono. And I had never been to Sicily. I'd been to Italy many times, but had never been to Sicily until 2 years ago, when we went with some friends, flew into Palermo, and that actually went to Casalbuono and drove across Sicily, which I loved. And it wasn't the Sicily that my grandparents came from. My grandfather died before I was born. I never met him, but my grandmother and my great-grandmother, who was widowed at 29 after she'd had 11 children and lived until she was 98. So had the same black dress for like 117 years, under the pear tree in Brooklyn, right? In Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, on Ocean Avenue. And so they talked about leaving the poverty, and my grandfather's family had been in, I think my grandmother's family in Casalbuono, sulfur miners. I mean, terrible life. They couldn't read or write. They left excruciating poverty. And so they never went back. They were like, it has nothing for me. It's nothing for me. There's no reason to go back. I have no idea whatever else they left, but they know, unlike other families that would go back or keep connected, they didn't. And so I was astonished by the beauty and the welcome and the sense of connectedness I felt to Sicily when I went back there. So everybody was right. It was different from Italy. I've always loved going to Italy, but the sense of home that I felt in Sicily was interesting. And my mother was French Canadian. She died when I was a kid. So I had a much sort of deeper connection to the Italian side of my family. I was raised in Brooklyn by my aunts, who were all 3'8" and weighed 550 pounds and wore floral print dresses at all times. So it looked like they were ottomans scattered across the room, that the only thing missing was the button on top of the head. Otherwise, they were like on casters, and they moved, just swiftly. And they were great dancers. Maria, you're a great dancer. They were great dancers. They would be bopping around in the kitchen, swinging each other around, and of course, we had the two kitchens. There was the upstairs kitchen that nobody ever used, and there was the downstairs kitchen that was where the action was. The upstairs kitchen, no meal was ever cooked in that kitchen. It was immaculate. It was perfect. It was gorgeous. The tea towels, the linens, pressed, everything. Meticulous, not a meal. And I realized it was for the people who would be allowed to sit in the living room. No one could go into where there was, the plastic, like the matting that was like a runway on the white carpet, and 3 pieces of brocade furniture that matched, covered in industrial grade vinyl that you sat down, they got you up with a spatula on a hot afternoon. And, but they taught me particularly about gender difference, that the women stopped laughing when they were around the men, and then they would go back to the downstairs kitchen and they would be hysterical. But when they were around their brothers and, the masters of the universe, they worshiped their brothers, their fathers, their uncles, their sons. But then they would go downstairs and did you see Charlie? Charlie still won't touch the calamari. He won't touch the calamari. Did you see him? I put it on his plate. He moved it over. He won't touch it. Go look, put more on his plate. See what he does. It was like men were a chemistry experiment. So I learned everything on Ocean Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. And it came from the Sicilian, which may not be the Italian side of my family.
No, it's Italy.
It counts?
It's officially Italy.
Yeah, I know, it's official.
Last time I checked, it's still Italy. Maria, your turn.
So my grandparents, my mother's parents, are from Calabria, and which is where Laura's from. And they had an arranged marriage, and they were married in Sinopoli, this small little mountain town there. And my grandfather's family, they were olive grovers. So they had groves of olives in Calabria. And they moved to New York. They came through Ellis Island. And my grandmother came with her son, my uncle. And then my mother was born here. And then my father's grandparents, my great-grandparents, are from Puglia. So just like the other side of the boot. And Puglia is very beautiful. I've been to Calabria and Puglia, it's definitely always been such a big part of my cultural identity. Being Italian, it's a very strong presence. It's a strong culture. I know a lot of people who say they're half Italian or a quarter Italian, and they're like, but it's basically my whole identity, because it just kind of takes over. And, so I'm just pretty much all Italian. And my parents grew up in Utica, New York. But I actually didn't grow up there. I grew up in Fayetteville, Georgia, where my parents moved, right before they got married. And there were no Italians there. I mean, I think I knew like one other Italian family. So I kind of grew up not really around a lot of Italians. I would, of course, go visit my family in Utica and my grandparents and my cousins. And that's when I would really be around the culture. But in my household, we always grew up eating Italian food. And my mom would say her, Calabrese words that we didn't really know what they meant, but she would describe things that way. And we just thought it was English. and I would say it outside of the house and people would be like, what does that mean? I was like, oh, I thought that was English. I kind of feel the same way the first time I went to Italy. It was especially Calabria, as I really felt this sense of feeling at home And yeah, and then eventually I went later and I studied and I worked with some commedia dell'arte professionals, and that was very, very fun.
Did you get any humor? Gina, you already said it about that. For you, Maria, there was the humor, the Italian humor, which is different from the American, but I think it's more cynical. I don't know. I found it more cynical, the Italian one, especially from the South. Did you get any sense of humor from your family, from your Italian family?
Yes, definitely. So my dad has 3 brothers, and just whenever they would get together, they were always like breaking each other's balls and talking about growing up in Utica, which was kind of like this rundown, city upstate. And they grew up in like a poor immigrant neighborhood, and they had like a rough childhood. Both my parents, they actually knew each other when they were kids, my parents. And yeah, and so they would just talk about just how different life was then, and how like if someone was if there was a kid and he was like on the wrong side of the baseball field, they were like, so we beat him up. Like that was how every story ended. Like, so we beat him up. and yeah, they just have such an interesting dynamic, especially how Gina was talking about like the Italian men and like the dynamic between Italian men and Italian women. And Italian women are just so powerful. I think especially women from Italy, I feel like they just they're way more like commanding and assertive than I think a lot of American women. And that's something I always admired about the women from my family, is that they hold their own and they're very strong, and the men might like think they're in charge, but everyone knows the women are like controlling everything from behind the scenes. Like you said, they're like, the men are just an experiment for them. So I definitely think that sort of like powerful force of, female Italian energy is very potent in comedy and how it's influenced my comedy.
I just want to show the piece where Gina is talking about vendetta, for Italy, taking it from the Italian family, what it means, the word vendetta. And so we'll show it and we'll come back.
Goes back to another family story, another funny woman story out of my earliest youth, where, as kids, we all spend our lives eavesdropping on what the grown-ups are talking about, right? And I remember listening to a couple of aunts of mine talking in Brooklyn, New York, and talking about something going on. Somebody had done somebody wrong, which was pretty typical conversation. And she said, but she's going to make a vendetta. She's going to make a vendetta. And I was listening, and afterwards I went and I said, Aunt Josephine, what does the word vendetta mean? And she paused. I was probably about 7 years old. She paused. She said, Gina, vendetta is Italian for, what do you mean you want to see other women?
So Gina, the question is really for both of you. You talk so much about women. Is that something that came from being Italian American, the fact that to express this women and men? You talk both about women and men. If you follow Maria on Twitter, she has a lot of jokes. And I remember when we were working together, she was always coming and rehearsal and complaining about, in a very funny way, about all the men. I could see the entire street and the entire man in the street, because she was like, that man, that guy, that man, that man. So, first of all, how this little piece started, Gina, the vendetta one, and then talk about your view, if the view has been influenced by being Italian American or what?
I think that, yes, my growing up in a very, in a way, not conservative politically, but although they were, but sort of, it was a Catholic, Roman Catholic family. And, the old line of, growing up Catholic when I was growing up meant that, the Catholic taught girls one lesson, and that was to remember that sex was something dirty and disgusting that you save for someone you love. And that was it. The lesson endeth. And that finding out what the undercurrent, the difference between the public life or the life that was shown to outsiders, and anybody who wasn't part of the immediate family of 118 was an outsider. Nobody in my family had friends. You only had other family because the family was too big. I mean, nobody had a friend. Whoever had a babysitter. I met waspy friends. It was like, well, the babysitter's coming. Whoever got their haircut out. I had aunts. I mean, I got my first haircut when I lived in London, around. But everybody else was coming with their scissors, and they were all hairdressers and manicurists, and they would come with their little packets and cut everybody and do everything. And so I learned, again, this sort of double life between the men and the women. And just as Maria was saying, that the women really did have this power, but the idea was, and I don't think this is particularly Italian American, or although it may be spotlighted by the Italian American life, because it is so divided. It's really a segregated life, the men and the women, or had been, and that the women really didn't show what they did in front of the men. There was a real sort of performance to gender. It was performed, and so that. It was like a wig and high heels and making red lipstick, hungry red lipstick. I remember that was the name of one of my aunt's lipsticks. And I thought, who is she hungry for? I mean, what's hungry red? I thought that's an interesting. And as a kid who liked words, liked language, I was always listening. So that was the vendetta thing. It's like, what does this word mean? What are they really talking about? I was listening for subtext. I just didn't have the word for it, but I'm trying to figure out what's the subtext to this conversation, and listening for stuff that I knew I wasn't supposed to be hearing, like my husband walking in the door is what I'm not supposed to be hearing. So, okay, he's going to run some errands and we'll be back. That's what and it's very nice. I did not marry. It turns out I have dated everybody in my youth. I dated widespread, open and accepting, like the Episcopalians or whoever they are. And but I never dated an Italian man, because I knew them. I never did. What was I going to do with an Italian man? So I married a man who I thought 100% he Irish and German and Norwegian and everything else. From father was a longshoreman in New Jersey, same background. None of our parents graduated from college. Another English professor, writer, and two most unlikely English professors. And turns out his family did the genetics thing. He's 10% Italian because his grandmother slept with the Italian guy from next door. She didn't look like any of her sisters. All the other sisters were named after flowers. Her name was Irene. So, I mean, we knew something was different. Everybody else was like Lily and Poppy and Rose. She's Irene, she was not one of the bouquet. And so it turns out I married an Italian. I went all the way out of my way not to marry an Italian. I ended up with an Italian. And so, and he ended up like, I felt at home with your family. So
the women, why talking about women?
Right. So why talk about women? Because women, the part that really got me growing up was that women didn't tell their own stories out loud. And I made it my job, and my humor comes from saying out loud what everybody else didn't want to say out loud, and what they all said in the kitchen, downstairs, in the bathroom. There's always laughter coming out of the ladies' room. You're at a show, you're at an event, you're in a museum. There's laughter coming out of the ladies' room. There is never laughter coming out of the men's room. And when there is laughter coming out of the men's room, we should worry. And women are they're telling different, we're making each other laugh. And when you put women together for more than 3 seconds, we laugh. And then somehow there's this public idea that women have no sense of humor. How can you have every woman laughing with other strange women that she doesn't know, and then have all of these men pontificating that women have no sense of humor? So I thought something's wrong here. Something doesn't match up. So I spent the last 30 years of my academic life trying to figure that out. That makes sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense. Maria, what about you?
What was the question again?
The question is that you focus a lot. I mean, you are a feminist, as you like to point out. So why talking about life in a female perspective, meaning that, you talk a lot about men, about guys, about their faults and and scenes.
Yes, I think for me, especially, there is that difference growing up, especially like in an Italian household. My parents are both Catholic as well, and there's just a difference between what me and my sister were allowed to do than what my brother was allowed to do. He just had a lot more freedom. If he messed up, it wasn't, as big of a thing, but he could come home whenever he wanted until 4 a.m, but I had to be home at 10, all that kind of stuff. And growing up in that environment and seeing how you're being treated differently. And I don't blame them at all, because the world is horrible. I don't blame them, but it's not their fault. But that's just how it is. And from when I was very young, I was making these videos with my parents' video camera. And I felt the most free and the most able to be funny and my authentic self when I would dress up like a man. And I think that I associated being a man with having a sort of freedom that I didn't have when I was a girl. And so I would always dress up like a man, and I would paint mustaches on, and I would do a silly character, and I didn't have to be pretty, and I didn't have to fit into the feminine mystique or whatever I thought that was at the time, my idea of that as a little girl. And especially because I didn't see, I saw Lucille Ball, of course, on TV as a funny woman, but there weren't a lot of examples of like funny women that I was seeing. And so I just kind of associated funny with like masculinity, I guess. And then as I got older and I continued to do acting and play different characters, even when I was in college, I was cast as a male character several times. And I think it was because there were just a lot more written comedic male characters. That's its own problem. But it's just a trend that you can't help but notice when you grow up in this body, and you realize you see the differences. And there's a sort of freedom for me when I dress and drag that I don't have when I'm a woman, I guess.
And this is the perfect time to ask you about the famous Andrew Cuomo impersonation. Well, I don't know if I want to call it impersonation. How would you call it? Lip sync?
A lip sync, I guess. Yeah.
So let's watch it. Let's watch the famous boyfriend episode, because there are many. How many did you do?
There's like 25 or something. I did a lot.
Yeah. So let's watch one moment the famous boyfriend, the episode about the boyfriend, and then we'll come back.
Last point, on a personal point, I have my daughter Mariah, who is with me, and she is the third daughter for me. The last thing they want to do is hang out with Pop, right? And Mariah brought her boyfriend, who's also here. The boyfriend is very nice, and we like the boyfriend. Advice to fathers. The answer on what you think of the boyfriend is always, I like the boyfriend, always. Because there's only two options. Either you like the boyfriend, in which case you say, I like the boyfriend, or you don't like the boyfriend. But you can never say you don't like the boyfriend. I learned this lesson the hard way. Otherwise, it triggers NDS. NDS is Natural Defiance Syndrome. It's not documented, but it is a psychological condition where if you say as a father, I don't like him, Natural Defiance Syndrome kicks in, and then they like the boyfriend more because he is opposed by the father. So the answer has to be, I like the boyfriend. In this case, I actually like the boyfriend. But even if you don't like the boyfriend, the answer can only be that I like the boyfriend. But we're going to be at dinner with the boyfriend, and we're going to have our spaghetti and our meatballs. They won't eat the spaghetti and the meatballs because when I cook it, they just won't eat it. But they move it around the dish, and that's all I can ask.
So tell me how all this started. I may suspect something, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, Definitely we were in the pandemic, and Cuomo was doing his briefings every day. And I was watching them just, as a concerned citizen of New York and wanting to know what to do and feeling scared and confused. But I couldn't help but notice when I saw the briefing that he did, I think it was April 1st, where he went on this long tangent about the boyfriend. And it was just, when I saw it, it was just so, it was so Italian to me. And I was just like, I know this character. I know this Italian dad, like going on, like not stopping. And I was just like, is no one noticing this right now? And I just thought it was so funny. And I just like kept thinking about it. And I had been like, making some comedy videos on Instagram and stuff. And then I saw like the trend of lip syncing and all that on TikTok. And I saw Sarah Cooper's Trump lip syncs. And I was like, oh, lip syncing. Well, that's like an idea. And I saw that like a lot of people were doing that. So I was like, okay, that's kind of a form I've never tried before. And I thought it would be fun because what he said was already its own comedy act. Like I didn't really have anywhere to heighten further from it. So I just decided to try that form and kind of show what was his inner monologue, what was going on inside of his mind when he was saying that visually.
Well, no, you didn't just do Cuomo, you did everyone.
Oh yeah, I was also.
That was also the
fun room. Is the boyfriend there? Because he said he was there with him, and I was like, "Where are they? And what are their reactions?" So I wanted to show their reactions too.
Yeah, and so this brought you a lot of viewers. What was the reaction to that? Did you get all good reaction, or there was someone offended by that?
I don't think anyone was offended per se. I thought a lot of people just thought it was funny. And, some people, I don't know if anyone was offended. Some people were like, women aren't funny. And like, saying I wasn't funny, which is fine. Like, you don't have to think I'm funny. But I thought it was a pretty overall, just like everyone just needed a good laugh and they had a laugh.
Can I?
Yes, sure. Absolutely.
That the idea that every time a woman does humor, that she's an anomaly. I mean, it's right. Talking about Lucille Ball. It's like there was one funny woman, or there was Carol Burnett, but that's just another funny woman. That's like, and then if a woman isn't funny when she's trying to be funny, then she's letting down the whole side. She's representing the whole team. It's like, and all of these men fail at comedy, but they're not, nobody's then going to say men aren't funny.
Right.
But if one woman at one point doesn't succeed in what she's doing, then all women, and Christopher Hitchens or everybody dead now. I'm trying to think of the live people who were saying, I mean, maybe, I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, but all of these men who were saying that women aren't funny, Jerry Lewis, I mean, these people who are the authorities, the cultural critics, the performance,
comedy authorities.
As if, that's like, comedy authority is a contradiction in terms. And when we're talking about authoritative men, I thought that's redundant. I mean, this is like, you can't write about authoritative men.
But sorry if I interrupt you, but Franca Valeri, this is why she was exceptional. Right. She started in the 50s when the women were Sophia Loren and Gina Lollobrigida. So the beauty that you couldn't, and she was not ugly, but she was told to be ugly because she was funny.
But that's
either you're ugly or you are. So if you're ugly, you could be funny, but otherwise you are just a babe. That's it.
But that's absolutely, Laura. And that is but that's the same thing happened in the States with Phyllis Diller around the same time. Because Phyllis Diller she had won beauty pageants. And they said, you have to make yourself a harridan. You have to take yourself out of the sexual marketplace. It was like Joan Rivers. You can't be cute because men, if they look at you, they won't listen to you. You will lose your audience. They're looking at you. They're not listening. And they were going to play the Catskills. They were going to go play these big comedy rooms. They had to have the men, they had to self-deprecate their own bodies and their own looks. They had to erase their sexual femininity. You couldn't be erotic and comic simultaneously, where women are still saying, oh, I want a guy who's funny. That's really sexy to me. For men say, if you say, I got this woman, you're going to love her. She has a great sense of humor. They still think that means she has one eye in the middle of her forehead. They think that humor is a compensation for lack of having big tits or long legs. Well, what's wrong with her that she's funny? Because she only learned to be funny to make up for something else she doesn't have.
But actually, when I was thinking about our meeting, our conversation, I love all the late shows. I am a big fan of stand-up and stuff. But I could tell you that there are more female comedians doing one-woman show. We have stand-up, but it's a kind of different. Let's say one solo shows. We have more in Italy than here that are famous. I mean, we have Tina Fey here as all this, but there is there are TV personalities, but in theater or in the being very, very famous, we have had many in the last 30 years, thanks to Franca Valeri, who started. Now, my question is actually, now, in the late shows, for instance, they're all men, but Samantha Bee. But she's relegated to a certain channel that is not the main channel. So why don't we see more late show hosts, women? What do you think?
Go ahead. I'd like to hear you. I got my own shtick on this, but let's hear it from you.
I think one of the main reasons is that all the late night shows start off with politics, and they all talk about politics. And politics is run by men, and it's, how could a woman talk about something that's pretty much run by men? Like, what is her opinion on what does it matter what she thinks about what all these men are doing and controlling? I feel like that's the idea. Like, how could she possibly comment on it?
And I agree with Maria that it's about everything run by men. I mean, that finally the late night hosts are like the smartest kids in class. They get the mic with the monologue. They're the comic authority. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're the one who sort of sums it up for the day. I have students, very smart kids, but they get their news from the late night comics. They're listening to Trevor Noah. That's where they're getting their news. And which it could be worse. But I mean, so it's one person with a mic behind a desk, right? We're barely in front of a desk. That's an authoritative position. America is still not ready to listen to a woman with a mic at a desk and have her be the final opinion on whatever the important news was of the day. They're just not ready, and they're not ready to do that. Especially late night is still mostly, I don't know what's happening with the streaming, but the last time I looked, it was still the over 50 crowd that actually watched TV in real time. And the over 50 crowd, as one of them, are really not ready to have the woman pick up the mic and really listen to her. They're still looking for the boys, even if the boys are 30 years younger. They're looking for the boys to be the last word. And that is talk about systemic, sexism. That goes so far back. With the mother, they can have a team of however many writers, behind them, and however many of them can be women, but they don't care. It's got to be presented by the male figure who carries the weight of the final word behind him, even if it's women who has the last laugh.
Yeah. We have to somehow I'd say applaud Seth Meyers, who puts, two women, the two writers, he puts them all the time on screen, and at least he gives us some. Right. And I have to say, Samantha Bee is a great
she's terrific
host. She does a great job, and she doesn't have a lot of time, and she really nails it all the time. So it's interesting how it doesn't happen. In Italy, there was a TV program, La TV delle Ragazze, that brought together it was all female comedians. This is why we have, and it was in the 70s, I said it not wrong. late 70s. So this is why now we have all these comedians, because at that time there was this program very successful about, and it was like I think it was on the third channel of the national TV, so it was not like relegated in somewhere in the broadcasting world. And this is how all these women were brought up and to the attention of everyone. And now they're still working. Everyone is working. Some are only writers, and most of them actresses that they do, serious film that they then go and do their own solo show or shows. Now we are almost done with our conversation, which this is only the first hour of our conversation. We'll have many more. What is next for the two of you?
I've got a book coming out in the spring, and maybe again, if we do another version of it, both Laura and Maria, maybe you'll think about being in it. We're hoping to do a sort of series. This one is called Fast, Funny Women. And there are 75 flash nonfiction pieces in it, and they're all hilarious. And so the likes of, it'll be out on March 2nd of next year, when God willing, we can all laugh. And Mimi Pond, you might recognize from the New Yorker, did the cover. She's a graphic artist who's been a New York Times bestseller with her book Over Easy. There are many Italian-American women writers in it. Jane Smiley, the Pulitzer Prize winner, wrote a piece for it. Liza Donnelly, who's another cartoonist writer for the New Yorker. Faye Weldon, the British author. Lots of poets, Marge Piercy, came up with original pieces, and it's all about humor. And so there are women from age 19 to 90 who wrote new pieces for this book, because we want to get all different kinds of women talking about being funny, and nobody else is going to do it except for us. So we have to form these communities and celebrate this, or it's going to be every 10 years, there's a new story. Are women funny? Have you seen a new crop of funny women? And it's like, I've been doing this too long now. Like, honest to God, baby, we've always been laughing at you. We've always been laughing at you. It's just every 10 years you start to listen. So that's the next one for me.
And you find all your books are in the books stores.
People can come onto my, I have a Facebook page. I love the newer forms of social media. I can't do them. I leave that to Maria. I will watch her on Instagram and on Twitter, and the rest I follow, but I can't produce for that. But the books are available at my Facebook page and the website. It's ginabarreca.com. It's 2 R's and 1 C. That's all you got to remember. But you can type almost anything, Gina, B-A, and then R's and C's, it'll come up. It's just, there's not.
And there are also Kindle editions.
Yeah, they're on Kindle. They're on, absolutely. The audiobook, the new one's going to be an audiobook. So there are lots of
anything. You have a lot of
almost anything. I'll come to your house and read to you. I'll bring a lasagna. It'll be fine.
That's the experience I want.
That's okay. We'll make that. The next time we get together, we'll all bring our own lasagna pieces and compete like real Italian. We'll leave.
And I really suggest everyone to read it, because especially in these times, you need a good laugh, and it's very hilarious. All the books are really hilarious, and you can recognize. And also, I love the use of language. The way you use language is so interesting. But that is for another conversation. Maria, are we going to see you? Well, Cuomo is doing every day, almost every day.
It's too much work. I gotta stop at some time. I'm going to continue to make content, for the internet, but I've been working behind the scenes on some other projects for TV. And so hopefully one of those will pick up. So I guess that's all I can say right now.
And what about your stand-up comedy? How can people, find out where you are and when?
So I'm I've just been doing this is only the second show I've done since the pandemic. So I do want to start to try to perform a little bit more as the opportunities come. And usually I'll just post it on Twitter like a couple days before or the day of, whenever I find out that I'm doing it. And then I'll just put the location, and I usually just show up and pay $5 or something. So yeah, it's my social media.
That's
And your social media is, can you tell us?
It's just my first and last name.
Okay. So at Maria DeCotis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So ladies, thank you so much. Thank you. I will stay here forever, but we have a limited time, but we will be back without the Austrian accent. We will be back. And we will laugh again. In the meantime, thank you to everyone who listened to us. Thank you to Stefano, to Julian, and make sure that you tune in next Thursday. From very strong women, we go to strong men, which are not nice at all, like our strong women, with Ruth Ben-Yad and her new book. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Good
Thank you, Gina.
Bye.